Does anyone doubt that they would want America to stand up against Putin's aggression here in Europe today? They stormed the beaches alongside our allies. Does anyone believe these Rangers would want America to go it alone today?
President Biden earlier today delivering an address while visiting Normandy for the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, standing at the very spot where Ronald Reagan spoke 4 decades earlier at Pointe du Hoc. Joining us now, our political panel. Let's get into it with Jeannie Shanzano, Iona University political science professor and senior democracy fellow with the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. And Lester Munson's here, Republican strategist, co-head of the international practice at BGR Group. It's great to see you both. Welcome back, Jeannie. This was round 2, actually, for Joe Biden, and we spoke yesterday on Balance of Power about his initial address, striking similar themes. But to see the White House channeling Ronald Reagan openly like this tells you what about his place in the political universe right now on this campaign?
Yeah, it's quite a switch from where he was when he was in the Senate, very critical of Ronald Reagan. He's now channeling him, which I think speaks probably less to how, Biden has changed than how the GOP has changed, which is remarkably as it pertains to foreign policy. And I thought the speech was strong. He did a good job. He made the case optimistically that America is great. It doesn't need to be made great again. So he was right on the tone. I'm not sure they should have set him up to meet one of the great speeches of the 20th century. I don't think that's ever a good idea, but they did it. And, I thought he did a good job. It's not going to be remembered in the way Reagan's was, but it was a smart speech, and I think he handled it well.
Lester, I've heard a lot about plagiarism on social media today, which I don't think is fair. He was telling the same story from the same spot. But I've also heard a lot about raising expectations. The White House goes out to say, we're going to basically match or raise one of the great political speeches in White House history. That's quite a way to set up the president here. How did it play for you?
Yeah, I think I agree with Jeannie on that score. Maybe they didn't have to draw such an explicit parallel. I liked a lot of the president's speech. That's an iconic place for America. Of course, people are emotionally involved. It's hugely important. I wish he had not been so political abroad, and I wish he were not using that speech for what I think is trying to get a little advantage over his likely opponent in the fall.
Is this a water's edge argument? Or
It's a little bit of a water's edge argument. I don't think he should be political abroad. I don't think people should criticize him from here. So I hope I'm not criticizing him too much. But
I understand.
I think it's an opportunity for him to be, the leader of all Americans and to speak for all of us and talk about the sacrifices that were made 80 years ago and how hugely important they were.
What did you make of the optics as we watched the president in shots right now on Bloomberg TV approaching the podium here, the aviators, the grandeur of that spot and the history of that spot, Jeannie? Many pointed out the fact that the White House actually took a bit of a risk by letting the president take that long walk in front of people. So many are trying to judge every move he makes as an 80-something-year-old and what his age means in this campaign. Did he win on that score?
I think he did. If people watch the speech, it is absolutely glorious. The shots. I heard Nancy Pelosi, who was there in person, like so many congressmen and women, describe his speech as almost prayerful. He was trying to exude strength, which his campaign says is critically important. And he did the whole aviator thing, which, people seem to like. He did. That said, the media environment has changed so very much. I'm not sure it resonates at all in the way, say, the speech did 40 years ago with Reagan, where a great speech like that increased his poll numbers. And he, of course, won, a huge, huge victory in that election. It doesn't work the same. I mean, the people who mentioned to me what was happening overseas with Biden in the last couple days, they were looking at these little clips on TikTok and others, which suggest that he may have sat when he shouldn't have sat or turned when he shouldn't have turned and those kinds of things. And so this is where we are in this media environment. It's awfully tough for anybody. And with age hanging over his head, he's 8 years older than Reagan was at the time. So it is very, very tough.
It says a lot as we spend time with Lester and Jeannie. and a pressing issue that will face the president as he moves from France to the G7 next week, talking with our allies not only about Ukraine, but Israel. And this is coming against the backdrop of news now. We expect Benjamin Netanyahu in the nation's capital to address a joint session of Congress on July 24th. This just emerging in the past 24 hours. And I asked Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, a Democrat from Missouri, the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, yesterday in advance of this date being confirmed, about his thoughts on the visit and whether he would attend.
The man is having difficulty trying to keep his own job in his own country, and I'm not sure the reason we're inviting him here, but I'm not. It may not be a good idea unless he's coming here and he's going to sit down with Biden, and they're going to end up agreeing on some kind of terms.
Lester, the congressman said he was struggling with the prospect of whether to attend this address or not. Now that we know it's a joint session, Chuck Schumer clearly didn't think he had a choice. Do all members need to be there?
I think so. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries of the House also signed the letter inviting the prime minister to come speak. He's a hugely important figure in world politics. Congress has a role in foreign policy in almost every instance. I think it's going to be an important speech. I think members should go. Doesn't mean they have to endorse every word he says. But I think it's important to have this conversation with such a close friend of the United States and the state of Israel.
We're running out of time here, Jeannie, but I just wonder quickly your thoughts on this. How many progressive Democrats will boycott that speech?
I think a good number. We heard today all the way from France that Nancy Pelosi, critical of the invitation as she was the last one, a lot of Democrats saying he shouldn't have been invited and they may not attend. So I think it's going to be very divisive on the Democratic side.
Our panel stays with us as we turn to President Trump campaigning on the West Coast in an effort to ramp up fundraising efforts that are already doing quite well in the wake of his guilty verdicts. More with Lester and Jeannie next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.